My name is Amelia Hart, 25 years old. I still remember the sound before the pain, a violent crunching scream of metal against metal that swallowed every other noise on the street. One second I was scrolling through my phone, half listening to the rain drumming on the car roof. The next I was slammed forward, my neck snapping against the seatbelt. For a moment, there was only ringing silence and the taste of blood in my mouth. The car had been parked outside my friend's house. I was waiting for her to bring me the birthday cake she'd ordered from my bakery, a vanilla chiffon with sugared petals. Ironically, the cake was still in the passenger seat when the other car rammed into mine, crushing the box like paper. When I tried to move, pain shot through my neck and down my spine. My hands shook as I fumbled for the door handle. I couldn't get out. My friend Nora came running, her voice trembling as she shouted for help. Within minutes, the street filled with the smell of burnt rubber and gasoline. The man who'd hit me, Chris, stumbled out of his luxury sedan, his shirt half untucked, his face pale. He reeked of something cheap and chemical, a mix of alcohol and cologne, like he'd tried to scrub away the night before. He kept muttering, "It was just a mistake, I swear. I didn't see you." I couldn't even look at him. My head throbbed. When the paramedics arrived, I was strapped into a stretcher neck, immobilized rain soaking into my jeans. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the doctor's words blurred together: aggravated spinal injury, torn ligament, months of therapy. The numbers came next: $22,000 for everything. My insurance barely covered half. I remember laughing softly, though nothing was funny. I run a small bakery called Hearth and Crumb, a place that smells of butter and sugar from the moment you step inside. I've built it on my own, every cupcake, every customer, every late-night batch of dough. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. And yet that night, as I lay in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling, I felt like my life wasn't mine anymore. When the police arrived to take my statement, I told them clearly he was drunk. The officer exchanged a look with another, the kind that says this one's complicated. They mumbled something about connections and accidental swerving. Later, I overheard one of the nurses whisper that Chris's uncle was a major real estate developer, the kind who could make problems disappear. I didn't care who he was. He'd hit my car, hurt me, and now he was trying to walk away from it. That night, Walter, my boyfriend, came to see me. He stood by the door, crisp suit, perfect posture, the kind of man who looked out of place in a hospital room. When his eyes landed on my neck brace, he frowned, but not with concern, with discomfort. "Amelia, maybe you should let this go," he said quietly. "These kinds of cases, they get messy, especially when the other guy has influence." I blinked at him. "Let it go. He could have killed me, Walter." "I know, but suing someone like that, it won't end well. Just get the insurance payout. Move on. Move on." The words stung more than the pain in my neck. He talked like I was overreacting, like my pain had an expiration date. I stared at him, wondering when his tone had turned from gentle to patronizing. Maybe I'd never noticed it before, the subtle way he spoke down to me, the way his confidence filled every silence, leaving no room for mine. "I'm pressing charges," I said firmly. He sighed, rubbing his temple like I was a difficult client instead of his girlfriend. "Fine, but don't ask me to represent you." The air between us went cold. For the first time since the accident, I felt something sharper than pain disappointment. He could have stood beside me, but he'd already chosen to stand behind convenience. After he left, Nora came in with flowers from my bakery's regular customers. "Get well soon," Amelia scribbled in messy handwriting. I tried to smile. My hands still smelled faintly of sugar, but all I could think about was the stench of alcohol and disinfectant that had clung to Chris and now somehow to Walter too. By the time I was discharged, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this go. Not because of the money, but because someone needed to say no to people like them. I filed my case. My cousin Clara, a new lawyer with a fierce sense of justice, took it immediately. "Don't worry, Ames," she said, squeezing my hand. "We'll make him pay." But late that night, as I sat in my apartment with the collar still tight around my neck, the phone buzzed with a message from Walter. "You really shouldn't do this. You don't know who you're going up against." I stared at the screen. Something in me cracked a small, quiet realization that the man I loved wasn't trying to protect me. He was protecting himself. As I looked at my reflection in the dark window, the bruises on my neck fading into the city lights outside, I thought, the crash didn't just break my bones. It broke something inside me that won't heal the same way. Walter used to be my safe place, the kind of man who made everything feel measured, predictable. But after the accident, I began to see the fine cracks running beneath his calm surface. He wasn't cold because he didn't care. He was cold because he'd built his entire life on control, and my pain was something he couldn't control. 3 days after I got home from the hospital, I invited him over to talk. The bakery downstairs still smelled of warm bread, but I couldn't taste or smell much beyond the metallic ache of painkillers in my throat. I wanted to believe that maybe he'd just been stressed, that he'd show up with empathy, or at least decency. He arrived in his usual gray suit briefcase in hand as if we were meeting to discuss a client, not my life. He glanced at my collar, then at the mess of unpaid bills on my coffee table. "So, how's your neck?" he asked, voice even detached. I laughed bitterly. "Stiff. Thanks for asking." He didn't notice the sarcasm. "Amelia, I've been thinking. You should let your insurance handle this. There's no need to drag this into court." "You mean there's no need to inconvenience your friends?" His brow furrowed. "My friends, I don't even know this guy." "Then why are you defending him?" That was when I saw it, a flicker of hesitation gone almost instantly. But it was there. "I'm not defending anyone. I'm just saying these cases can get ugly. And honestly," he paused, choosing his words like weapons you won't win. "Not against someone like that." It wasn't his words that broke me. It was the certainty in his tone. Like he'd already done the math and decided I wasn't worth fighting for. "I didn't realize justice was a numbers game to you," I said quietly. He sighed. "It's not about justice, Amelia. It's about knowing when to pick your battles." "I already picked mine." He looked at me for a long moment, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Then he stood. "Fine. Do what you want. But don't come crying to me when it blows up in your face." The door closed behind him, and I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my phone and called Clara. "I'm done waiting," I told her. "Let's file the claim." She didn't hesitate. "Good. I'll draft the paperwork tonight." That night, the apartment felt emptier than ever. My pillow still smelled like Walter's cologne, and it made me sick. The same synthetic polished scent I'd caught on Chris after the crash alcohol disguised by expensive perfume. I couldn't tell where one man ended and the other began anymore. The next morning, Clara came by with the documents. "We'll sue for $5,000, she said. "It's not much, but it's symbolic. It says you won't be silenced." I signed without blinking. Days turned into weeks. I avoided Walter completely. He didn't reach out either, which was a relief until it became a different kind of pain, the quiet confirmation that he didn't care enough to try. Then one evening, as I was closing up the bakery, my phone buzzed with his name. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Amelia," his voice was calm, too calm. "I wanted to tell you before you heard from someone else." "Heard what?" "I'm representing Chris." My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "You're what?" He approached the firm. "My boss assigned me. I can't say no." "You could have refused." "It's complicated." "No, Walter," I said, my voice trembling. "It's simple. You're defending the man who almost paralyzed me. I'm just doing my job." I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere between heartbreak and fury. "You're doing your job. That's your excuse for betraying me." "Don't make this emotional," he said sharply. "You're not thinking rationally." "Oh, I'm thinking clearly." For the first time I snapped. "You chose your side, Walter. Don't pretend it wasn't deliberate." There was silence. Then, in a tone that chilled me, he said, "You don't want to pick a fight with me in court, Amelia. You'll lose." The call ended before I could reply. I stood in the middle of my bakery, surrounded by the scent of burnt sugar and bread gone cold, my hands trembling so hard that the tray of cupcakes slid off the counter. Frosting splattered across the tiles like pale blood. The next morning, I went to see Sophie, Walter's sister, my best friend since college. I hadn't planned on telling her everything, but when she opened the door, concern written across her face, the words just spilled out. "Your brother, he's defending the man who hurt me." Her jaw tightened. "He wouldn't." "He already has." Sophie sank onto the couch, speechless. Then, after a long moment, she whispered, "He's lost it. He's been different lately. Obsessed with winning, with clients who pay more." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. He used to talk about ethics, about fairness. What happened? "Money happened," she said bitterly. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Walter's words, "You'll lose." Maybe he was right. Maybe I would lose the case. But there was something he didn't understand. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about not letting him rewrite the truth. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel broken. I felt furious and strangely alive. The morning after Walter's call felt like waking up in a different life. The same walls, same sunlight through the curtains, but a different kind of air. Heavy, quiet, final. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. My hands were shaking. Not from pain this time, but from rage. I kept replaying his words in my head. Don't make this emotional. The arrogance, the dismissiveness. The man who once held me through nightmares was now preparing to cross-examine me in a courtroom. I tried to convince myself it was just temporary a bad dream I'd wake up from, but the papers Clara handed me that afternoon proved otherwise. Defendant's counsel, Walter Cole Esco. Seeing his name printed beside Chris's was like a slap I hadn't braced for. Are you okay? Clara asked, studying me. I will be, I said, lying through my teeth. She placed a hand on mine. We'll be smart. Don't let his intimidation get to you. Her confidence was grounding. Clara had a way of making things sound simple, as if integrity itself were armor. But later that night, as I sat at my desk going through the medical receipts, that armor cracked. I stared at the totals, $22,000, and the fine print reminding me that my non-overnight stay disqualified me from full coverage. I couldn't afford this fight, but I couldn't afford to back down either. So I did something impulsive. I called Sophie. She answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger, how are you holding up? There was warmth in her voice, the same warmth that had once made Walter seem human. We'd been friends before he and I had even started dating. She was the one who'd introduced us, the one who swore we were soul twins, who just hadn't realized it yet. Now I wondered if she'd regret that sentence forever. I need to tell you something, I said quietly. Something in my tone made her drop the cheerfulness. What happened? Your brother. He's defending the guy who hit me. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. You're joking. I wish I was. He wouldn't. He already is. The paperwork's filed. Clara confirmed it. For a long moment, all I heard was breathing on the other end. Then Sophie whispered, he's gone too far this time. I told her everything, the accident, the injuries, the way Walter dismissed me like I was making a fuss over nothing, and how he'd called me smug as if I should thank him for the warning. Sophie was furious. Our parents will lose their minds. You know how Dad feels about ethics in the courtroom. He raised us to believe the law is supposed to protect people, not crush them. I didn't want to drag your family into this, I said, but I couldn't stay quiet. I thought you should know. She hesitated. No. I'm glad you told me. He needs to face consequences. Maybe hearing it from me will make him wake up. After we hung up, I felt lighter, but only for a moment. The guilt came next. What if I'd gone too far? What if this tore their family apart? The next morning, the guilt turned into dread. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, Walter. I almost ignored it, but part of me needed to hear his voice to understand just how low he could go. The moment I answered, his tone was ice. You went to my sister. I didn't go to her. I told her the truth. You had no right to drag my family into this. You had no right to defend the man who hurt me. He let out a sharp breath, the kind he used when clients annoyed him. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I told the truth. For a heartbeat silence. Then his voice changed, low, venomous. You think you can win this? You won't. I'll make sure of it. My stomach twisted. Are you threatening me? No. I'm warning you. You started this war, Amelia. Don't cry when you lose it. The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. Hair unkempt collar, strapped tight dark circles under my eyes. I barely recognized myself, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Later that day, Sophie showed up at my bakery, visibly shaken. You told him, she said softly. He called me right after you hung up. I figured he would. She glanced around, lowering her voice. My parents know now. Dad's furious. Said if Walter doesn't drop the case, he's cutting him off. I froze. Sophie, I didn't want, I know. But he deserves this. He's been chasing money for years. Maybe this will finally make him stop. Her eyes softened. He used to admire people like you, people who built something from nothing. But somewhere along the way, he decided power mattered more than pride. That night I lay awake listening to the rain. The same rain that had fallen the night of the crash. I thought about Walter, how easily he could look at me and see a case file instead of a person. My phone buzzed again around midnight, an unknown number this time. Walter. You should have left my family out of it. You'll regret this. I didn't reply. I just blocked the number, then turned off my phone. Outside, lightning flashed bright enough to illuminate the reflection of my own face in the window. My eyes looked different now, harder, sharper. Somewhere between that crash and this moment, I realized something terrifying and freeing. At the same time, I didn't love him anymore. The next morning, I went back to the bakery early. The air smelled of cinnamon and yeast, comforting and familiar. I started kneading dough with slow, steady pressure. My neck throbbed, but I didn't stop. If Walter wanted a war, I'd give him one, not out of spite, but out of principle, because the woman he underestimated was still standing. Bruised, yes, but unbroken. The day of the first hearing dawned gray and heavy, like the world itself had decided to hold its breath. I arrived early, collar still stiff around my neck, my palms damp even though the courtroom air was freezing. Claire walked beside me, heels clicking with the calm rhythm of someone who'd been waiting for this moment all her life. "Don't look at him," she murmured. "If he tries to rattle you, stay still. He feeds off reaction." I nodded, though. Inside I was trembling. I hadn't seen Walter since that night he called me a fool for seeking justice. I told myself I didn't care that I was beyond it, but the truth was, crueler part of me still wanted him to look at me and regret everything. When we entered the courtroom, he was already there. Walter Cole, immaculate as ever, charcoal suit pressed to perfection, posture so straight it bordered on arrogance. He was leaning over Chris, whispering something with that rehearsed smirk I used to mistake for charm. When his eyes met mine, he didn't flinch. Neither did I. The judge called us to order. Papers shuffled, voices murmured, and then it began the legal duel between everything we'd once shared and everything we'd now become. Clara stood, her voice steady and confident, as she presented my case. A drunk driver, an injured victim, medical bills, unpaid, a life disrupted. Walter countered, smooth as silk, arguing that accidents happen and that I'd parked in a poorly lit zone. Every time he spoke, I caught flashes of the man I'd once known, articulate, persuasive, magnetic. But this wasn't the Walter I loved. This was the Walter I'd refused to see, the one who treated empathy as a weakness. At one point, he turned toward me, mid-argument, his tone sharp. "Ms. Hart, isn't it true that you've recovered enough to continue working?" The emphasis on Ms. Hart cut deep. It was the first time he'd used my name like a weapon. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I'm working through pain, the kind your client caused." A few people in the back gasped softly. The judge frowned, gesturing for order. Walter's jaw twitched, a tiny fracture in his mask. I held his gaze until he looked away. By the end of the session, my muscles ached from tension. The judge announced a continuation hearing in 3 weeks, claiming further evidence review. Walter had managed to delay the verdict, a small victory for him, another wound for me. As we exited, Clara muttered, "He's playing dirty Ames. Connections. Probably nudged the schedule himself." I nodded numbly. Let him. Every delay is a reminder of what kind of man he's become. Outside, the afternoon sky had turned bruised purple. I stood near the courthouse steps, watching people disappear into taxis while my own cab failed to show. My phone buzzed Walter again. Against every instinct, I answered. "Amelia," he began softly, too softly. "You don't need to do this." "I already did." He sighed. "Look, Chris's father cut him off after the accident. The guy's broke. I'm just trying to clean up the mess so it doesn't ruin both our lives." "Both our lives," I echoed. "Walter. I'm the one who was hurt. You chose to stand next to him." "You're being unreasonable," he offered to settle. $2,000 and we walk away." I felt my stomach turn. $2,000 doesn't even cover the collar I'm wearing. "You're being stubborn." "No," I said, my voice low, shaking. "I'm being fair. For once." He exhaled, and I could almost hear the irritation beneath his calm. "You know your pride will cost you. You think standing your ground makes you noble, but it just makes you foolish." That was the moment something inside me hardened. "You know what's foolish, Walter? Thinking you can wound someone and still be the hero in your own story." The rain started again. Faint at first, then louder, heavier, like the world had decided to drown the rest of our conversation. I turned away, gripping the handle of my bag so tightly my knuckles went white. "Goodbye, Walter." He called after me once, "Amelia, wait," but I didn't. When my cab finally pulled up, I slid inside, soaked and shaking, but lighter somehow. Through the window, I caught a last glimpse of him standing in the rain suit, darkened by water, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, I wondered if he finally saw what he'd lost. Later that night, I sat by the window of my apartment, the city lights bleeding into the fog. My phone was silent, mercifully. Clara texted to remind me to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. The court delay meant more bills, more stress, more waiting. But beneath the exhaustion, a small, fierce sense of satisfaction burned. I hadn't let him silence me. For years, I'd believed love was about compromise. Now I understood some compromises rot you from the inside out. The next hearing loomed like a storm on the horizon, and I could already sense that something darker was coming. Walter wasn't done. Neither was I. Still, as I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, I whispered to the quiet room. Sometimes justice comes slowly, but it still comes. And for the first time since the accident, I almost believed it. 3 weeks later, the second hearing arrived, and with it, a strange sense of calm. The kind that comes when you've already lost everything that can be taken from you. The courthouse lobby smelled of stale coffee and nerves. Clara was reviewing notes, her pen tapping rhythmically against the folder. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said, straightening the collar around my neck. The pain was dull now, not gone, just part of me, a reminder that some wounds heal into memory, not skin. Walter was already there when we entered. Same suit, same smug composure, but something about him looked off a faint shadow under his eyes, a restlessness in his movements. His client Chris sat behind him, fiddling with his tie, his face pale. Clara whispered, "He's scared." "Good," I said. "He should be." When the judge called us in, the air tightened. This time, Clara's argument cut sharper. She presented photos, bills, and the hospital statement that explicitly noted alcohol traces in Chris's system. Walter countered with technicalities, the lighting of the street, the ambiguity of breath test timing, all delivered in that practiced professional charm I used to mistake for truth. But when I looked at him now, I saw what I'd been blind to before, a man who didn't believe in right or wrong, only in winning. At one point, the judge asked if I wished to make a statement. My heart raced, but I stood. "Your Honor," I began, "I'm not here because I want money. I'm here because I was hurt, not just by a car, but by the way people like Chris think they can buy their way out of consequences." I didn't look at Walter, but I felt his gaze burning. I was told to let it go, I continued, to move on. But if I did that, what would that say about everyone else who can't afford to fight back? The room went silent. For a moment, even Walter stopped taking notes. When I sat down, Clara gave me the faintest smile, the kind that says you did it. Hours later, the gavel struck. Verdict in favor of the plaintiff. $5,000 in damages. Not a fortune, but a win. A small, stubborn win that meant everything. As the courtroom emptied, Chris's parents' people I'd never seen before swept in with lawyers and checkbooks. They didn't even look at me when they handed over the settlement documents. To them, this was pocket change, an inconvenience to be erased. But to me, it was proof that truth, no matter how small, still mattered. Walter didn't approach me right away. He stood frozen by the bench, pretending to gather papers. Clara nudged me. "Let's go celebrate." "I'll meet you outside," I said. When she left, Walter finally walked toward me. His tone was soft, cautious. "You won." "I did," I replied flatly. "You're satisfied?" "No, but I'm done." He nodded, slowly, eyes flickering with something like regret. "I didn't mean for it to end like this. Then maybe you shouldn't have started it." He looked down, then back at me. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "You made sure of that." I turned and walked away, heels echoing on the marble floor. Outside, the air felt different. Warmer somehow. Clara was waiting near the steps, holding 2 cups of vending machine coffee. $5,000 of justice, she said with a grin. I laughed for the first time in weeks, and worth every penny. When I got home that evening, I took off the neck brace and placed it on the table. My reflection in the window caught me by surprise. I looked older, steadier, like someone who'd finally learned to live without apology. I made tea, opened my laptop to balance my bakery's accounts, and for the first time since the crash, silence didn't scare me. Then came the knock. It was soft, almost hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there he was. Walter, holding a bouquet of roses, red perfect, rehearsed. "Don't," I said before he could speak. "Just listen," he pleaded. "Please." I didn't move, but I didn't shut the door either. "I was wrong," he said quickly. "About everything. I was proud, stubborn. I thought I could handle it without losing you, but I lost both the case and you." "You didn't lose me, Walter," I said quietly. "You gave me away when you chose money over morals." He swallowed hard, stepping closer. "I can fix this. I left the firm. I told my parents I slammed the door mid-sentence. The sound echoed through the apartment, final and merciless. He stayed outside for a while, knocking again, voice muffled through the wood. But I didn't answer. Eventually, silence returned. I watched through the peephole as he set the bouquet on the floor and walked away. The flowers looked out of place against the old doormat, too red, too alive for something that was already over. Later that night, I called Sophie. He came to my door, I said. I figured he might. She sighed. He's a mess. Dad still won't speak to him. He's lost his job. Honestly, I don't know if he regrets what he did or just hates that it cost him everything. He should regret both. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I'm proud of you, Amelia. You stood your ground. Not everyone does. After we hung up, I went to the bakery downstairs. The air was warm and sweet, filled with the familiar hum of mixers. I began kneading dough, slow, steady, deliberate. My neck twinged, but I didn't stop. Outside, dawn was breaking pale gold, spilling across the city. For months, I'd been haunted by the scent of disinfectant, of hospitals of loss. But now, as the first batch of vanilla rolls baked in the oven, the smell of sugar and butter took over again. And just like that, the bitterness faded, not completely, but enough. Maybe this was justice. Not the kind you win in court, but the kind you earn by refusing to let cruelty change who you are. A full year has passed since that final day in court. Some mornings I still wake up expecting to feel the weight of the neck brace the dull ache that once throbbed through every breath. But now there's only a faint stiffness and a reminder that pain, like people, eventually leaves if you stop feeding it. My name still hangs above the bakery door, hearth and crumb, painted in gold against weathered wood. The place smells the same as it did before everything fell apart, sugar, cinnamon, and a little bit of hope. But the woman behind the counter isn't the same. I'm calmer now, sharper, kinder too, but not to everyone, only to those who earn it. Business has grown. There's a second location now, something I never thought I'd be able to afford. Clara helped me set up the contracts, and every time I hand her a pastry box, we share a knowing smile, two women who learned that justice isn't about revenge, but reclamation. One morning, as I was unlocking the door, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophie. Thought you should know Walter moved away. Took a teaching job in another city. He says he's trying to start over. I stared at the text for a long moment. No bitterness, no joy, just quiet acceptance. I typed back, I hope he finds what he was really looking for. And I meant it, not because I'd forgiven him, but because I'd outgrown the need to hate him. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I decided to take a different route home. The road wound past the corner where everything had begun, the street where Chris's car had slammed into mine, where sirens had screamed and my life had splintered. I slowed down. The intersection looked different now. New lampposts, fresh paint, the road smooth and unbroken. A cat darted across the street, maybe the same kind he'd claimed he swerved to avoid. The irony almost made me laugh. For a moment, I parked there, windows down, letting the wind fill the car. I thought about that day, about the smell of alcohol and fear, about Walter's voice telling me to let it go. And then I realized I finally had. Because I won something bigger than money, bigger than a case. I won myself back. When I reached home, the sky was turning lavender. Inside the bakery, the ovens glowed, casting a soft amber light on everything I'd built. I tied my apron, brushed flour across the counter, and whispered to the quiet room, You made it. Outside, the rain began again. The same sound that once terrified me now felt comforting. It didn't wash anything away this time. It just reminded me that storms pass. As I placed a fresh tray of rolls in the window, I caught my reflection in the glass, older, wiser, still standing. The same girl who once thought love meant loyalty, no matter the cost, now knew better. Real love never demands you betray yourself. Somewhere out there, Walter might be sitting in another courtroom, another office, another empty apartment, wondering when everything slipped through his fingers. But that's no longer my story to tell. Mine is here in the hum of ovens, the laughter of customers, and the quiet knowledge that I fought, fell healed, and rose again. And as the city lights flickered to life, I whispered one last thought to myself, a truth that had taken a year to learn. Some accidents break you, others wake you.